the full quarantine look once again for another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, and today I'm here to talk to you about our Lord and Saviour, the Void. It's ExDeath, and ExDeath is going to be coming around with his Lost Chapter, new LD weapon, and all sorts of new tips and tricks for you when it comes to the Lufenia and the kit that comes along with ExDeath. So if that's all stuff that you guys are interested in, then of course stay tuned and keep on watching. Of course, as always, don't forget to check out all of my social media links down below, including Twitter, Twitch, Discord, all of that good stuff. I actually had my little Twitch recap thing happen earlier this week, and honestly, if you had told me a year ago that I'd be a full-time content creator now, it blows my mind. Like, the difference between my life at this point a year ago and now is night and day, and I have you guys to thank for that. Like, honestly, whether you've clicked on a video of mine, just found me in passing, subbed, check me out on Twitch, anything, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you guys for making my 2020 not nearly as scary as it could have been, and I hope that through 2021 I can make you guys proud and just do the best that I can to make this channel evolve over and over and over again to make it the best that it can be. Over on Patreon, obviously I shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video, and today that person is going to be Fumasha, who is a Vincent fan, and Vincent is one of my picks for the LD Global exclusive, so who knows, maybe we'll be lucky on that one. And another big shout out goes out to not just Fumasha, but all of my patrons as well for just being as supportive as you have been through all of this. Like, it makes the world of difference to me, and it really does keep me going, so thank you all very much. And if you'd like a title card just like Fumasha and other benefits as well, then consider becoming a patron yourself. Obviously, check out all of the websites around me, as you can see, for Opera Omnia, and as always, don't forget to check out all the other fantastic content creators there are out there for Dissidia other than myself. As always, when we start the Should You Pull videos, and in the eternal words of Salt and Pepper, let's talk about ExDeath. So let's talk about ExDeath and exactly what it is ExDeath does and what his new LD is going to bring along to him. Now, ExDeath's banner is a little bit suspect, honestly. Like, if you're just kind of pulling generally, I would avoid this because he's accompanied by Gilgamesh and Warrior of Light. Now, Warrior of Light is fine with his LD and everything. With just his EX, he's a little bit, at this point in time. And honestly, there's a much better banner coming out after ExDeath if you're after Firian's Burst. But ExDeath himself is actually fairly kind of swept under the rug because he's very, very different to many other characters in that his damage is not done in the same way as many other characters. When most characters attack, they drain the enemy's bravery and they give it to themselves, and then they break, and obviously anyone who's played Dissidia knows how this goes. Well, ExDeath functions a little differently. ExDeath's entire shtick is gravity damage, but it's reducing their bravery and gaining it for himself. So what he does is he does a similar kind of thing, but nothing he does can break the opponent. The idea is leaving the enemy at 0 bravery so that someone else can do the break. So Black Hole is basically the reason that you use this is to give him a buff that increases his max bravery in his attack, and it also inflicts a debuff on the enemy called Bud of Darkness. Now, with the 15 CP etc. weapon and all of that stuff, it does 2 levels of this, and this can go up to a maximum of 3 levels. So what Bud of Darkness is a sap ability. So you're getting bravery damage and then you're getting splash damage across the board, but it's draining the enemy's bravery like through an effect as opposed to actually hitting them. So this attack can't break the enemies. Like, nothing that ExDeath does actually breaks the enemy. So you can actually pair him up with characters like Lightning or other characters that really like having the break on their attack so that you can like take advantage of abilities you get when you do the breaks. So the only way that ExDeath can inflict bravery damage, like in the normal way, is through his Brave Attack Plus, which realistically you're probably never going to use. But the primary function of Black Hole is to inflict the Bud of Darkness debuff because it does actually enable a lot of stuff for him. Now, Almagest, now this is where things get really interesting when it comes to Almagest. And basically, this also is a bravery draining attack, as like the rest of his stuff, and it does more drainage depending on how many levels of Bud of Darkness are inflicted on the enemy, but it also inflicts another debuff called Curse. Now, Curse does some fairly minor attack speed, defense debuffs, things like that, but the thing that this does more differently to any other character in the entire game is it gives an HP poison effect. So it basically drains their health without you actually having to attack them at all. And it scales off of his attack. All of ExDeath's bravery draining scales off of his attack, and even though it's gravity based, it doesn't actually scale off of the enemy's current bravery. It scales off of his attack. So one thing that I think that people overlook, and actually I overlooked, and after having a conversation about it, I was like, oh yeah, that's really true, is that ExDeath is actually surprisingly potent at wiping out shields because of the way that his bravery calculation works. So as opposed to other characters who have gravity damage, he does it in a different way that actually really does help you get through shields, and a lot of very sort of irritating mechanics that enemies tend to do because he doesn't attack them in very much the same way. But Curse is a very, very unique thing to ExDeath. So having that, like, just basically, and the C55 and his 35 just makes all of that bit stronger. Now his EX also has a very unique thing about it. Again, it's 100% AoE damage. It's not the fastest recast rate in the world, but honestly, it doesn't need to be. It gives you an HP protection buff, or debuff in fact, that comes off of having the Bud of Darkness debuff on the enemy. Now don't worry too much about applying Bud of Darkness. Pretty much everything he does except for Almagest does actually apply that debuff, so you're gonna get 3 stacks of Bud of Darkness very quickly. But when you're using Grand Cross, which is his EX of course, you get a turn of Power of the Void. Now this basically is similar to Beatrix's buff, Reno's Pyramid debuff, but it functions a little differently in that any HP attacks that the enemy does will deal 0 damage. So that it works similarly to Beatrix's, whereas Reno's it doesn't do bravery, HP or anything. ExDeath just stops the HP damage, but after they've done that, if the enemy has bravery for whatever reason after doing an HP attack, it then drains them to 0, so that will always happen. And then he also has another buff that comes off of this after he goes to 2 out of 3 with the ingots that basically gives him bravery and HP regen as well. So basically he's actually quite sturdy for a character that does such strange things, and he starts with the buff that he gets from his EX, so Arboreal Mysteries, and the Incantation of Ill Intent, which he gets from his skill 1. He starts with that. All the enemies start with Bud of Darkness, so it only takes 1 casting of his skill 1 to get them up to 3 clicks of it, and therefore you go off to a lot from there. And also his HP plus, now starts adding Bud of Darkness levels onto it as long as they already have it, but they're going to because of this. Now, the LD does basically more of what ExDeath already does. So again, it's gravity based, but it reduces all their enemies' bravery to 0 straight off the bat. It increases his own bravery, and I should also mention that with his EX, he actually does battery the party with that particular attack, whereas the other attacks just battery himself. He has 100% AoE damage again on his LD, which is fantastic. It instantly puts everybody to 3 Bud of Darkness buffs, and it also puts a brand new debuff on the enemy called Dissipating Vortex. Now this lowers their attack, so it obviously compounds with all of the other debuffs that he has as well. And it also deals HP damage in a poison form again, so basically you're getting 2 lots of HP poison through Curse and this. So you're getting 2 lots of it all at once, so it all adds up, and it does mean that his damage capabilities are actually quite strong. They're just done in a very different way to most characters. So then, when you put your Power Stones and everything into it, you get 4 uses of this and 6 turns worth of the HP poison. So that's 24 turns of HP poison on top of what you're already getting out of Almagest from the Curse. So it actually does add up quite a lot. And let's not forget that in JP, he's recently just got on his burst in his LD boards and everything like that. And all it adds up to is a huge amount of off-turn damage. Now, I spoke very highly of off-turn damage when it came to Firion, and ExDeath is actually really good at it as well, because he really shines in fast enemy fights. So if an enemy is quite fast, then you can just apply these HP poisons, not worry about what they're doing too much, because if they hit you, that's fine, because then you've got an HP protection from his EX if you time it correctly, but you're also getting these HP drains, and you're able to take the bravery down quite easily because of the gravity-based nature of all of his moves. So while ExDeath is a bit of a weird one, and he's a bit of an oddball, he is also not in the best banner in the world, and his timing is a bit rough because we're all saving up for Ramza, the global exclusive LD, and all the good things that are going to come up with the anniversary. And a quick reminder as well, the anniversary countdown has started, so be sure to sign in or log into the game every day from now until then, because there's like nuggets and EX orbs and things like that. It's all good stuff. You definitely want to take advantage of that. But I wouldn't write ExDeath off. Like, honestly, he's one of the characters I regret not pulling for harder the first time he came around, just because he's so unique and so different to other characters. But I can see why, like, the fact that he doesn't function like as like simplistically as a lot of characters do will put a lot of people off. And realistically, you really don't need him for his Lufenia either. Now, when it comes to obviously his call ability and all stuff like that, his call ability is actually pretty solid. Basically, so you get Curse and Bud of Darkness off of Almagest as a call ability, and of course, because it's a gravity-based attack, you're actually going to be able to bring that along with you. So I actually think that his call ability is pretty useful, particularly because you're getting pretty much everything apart from the LD and the HP protection that you would have gotten from ExDeath anyway, so it's actually very handy. In terms of high armor, he has the debuff-based armor, so it's actually very strong as well. Like, it's obviously not as strong here as it is for. It's stronger here than it's listed because that's the Japanese version. But so it's a good one to have. But like, if you're going to use ExDeath a lot, which I don't think is going to be a regular thing for a lot of people, then you could pick this up if you're going to use him a lot, because he's a character that, because he functions weird and different to other characters, he's actually quite easy to fit into a lot of teams for that want to experiment that way. He's quite difficult to kind of maneuver in terms of like a regular sort of, you know, your normal team, purely because which slot do you remove him for? Like, you take your primary damage dealer, then you'll take a support character or a healer or something like that, and then if you wanted to, that third slot is where ExDeath can come in, because his damage is actually fairly high and his debuffs are not bad, and he has the protection. He has a little bit of everything, but just done in a very strange way. So I do actually really like him. And then in terms of artifacts, C50 attack, because all of his battery, all of his gravity stuff, based off of his attack, you want his attack to be high. And he has a C50 that's similar to, say, like Zac and Warrior of Light, where as long as his HP starts at 100%, like at the start of the wave, then he's going to have extra stats. So now let's take a look through the event that's going to come along with ExDeath in his Lost Chapter and the Lufenia that's going to accompany it. Now, the enemies this time around are going to be the Dwellers, which are like a variant on the Astaroths. We've actually fought these a few times before, and they're like, in terms of attacks, they do like to throw out quite a lot of HP attacks, as most enemies do at this point. But their primary kind of gimmick this time around, in terms of the Lufenia Orb, this appears at around 80% HP most of the time. I'll get to that in a moment. And basically it counts up by 10 every time they take sat or poison damage. So they take damage before they act. So any kind of thing like that. So you're going to want to bring characters like Sephiroth or ExDeath, obviously. Shantotto is a really good pick for this. As long as you've got some form of poison or sap damage, then it's going to push the orb back to a point where you really just don't really have to worry about it all that much. But their actual main gimmick is that they like kind of alternate between the two of them having this yellow aura. Now, what the yellow aura is where they, like, if they take it, when they take their turn, if you break them before they take their turn, then they'll counter you with like a Dispel, horrible Brave HP attack. So the idea is that you don't break the one that has the yellow aura at that time. Then that counter attack is strong enough that it might just straight up kill you. So you have to be very careful with it. But obviously the idea is that you're supposed to use ExDeath to use gravity, reduce their bravery to 0, so that when they do have their turn, it's not anything to worry about. And also to note as well that like traps, counters, things like that don't trigger that when they go off. So as they're attacking somebody that's going to counter them or anything like that, then you can get around it that way. Basically, this particular fight it's really awkward if you play it fair, but there's a lot of ways to break it. Like, if you have 8 ruins this fight, like destroys it. Like, basically you could just use him to have both the enemies lock onto him, because most of the attacks that the enemies do are single target, a lot of them are, and you can just evade, counter, and then he hasn't got to worry about it. Like, you can, if you have Firion and 8 together, you will ruin this fight. However, there is another way of getting around this, in that if the enemies are paralyzed or incapacitated before they hit that 80% threshold, the orb never actually appears. So this is, if you've got to want a fight where you can just break out the busted stuff like delay, turn deletion, making it so that they never get a turn, this is the one to do it on. The number of clears I've seen that take a Cloud, a Lightning, and then Kurasame or Shantotto or a Mid-Italian, there's loads of ways around it. As long as they are sort of paralyzed or incapacitated before they hit the 80% mark, or as you hit over that threshold, the Lufenia Orb never actually appears, so you could just get around it that way. Just bear in mind that obviously that's the kind of thing that can get patched between the Japanese version and the global version, so while I'm saying all of this, that might not necessarily translate over, so do be careful. And if you do want to do it like the normal way, bringing Gladio or Warrior of Light is going to protect you from 90% of the attacks that the enemies will do, so you can just get around it that way. Obviously, traps are a fantastic way out of having to deal with the counter attacks and stuff like that, but past that, it's like, honestly, if you've got the right character for this one's straight up a breeze, and you really don't need ExDeath for it. So now we come to the final question of the banner, of course, should you be pulling on ExDeath's banner? Now, this is all, again, going to be dependent on how your resources are looking, because honestly, if you're low on resources, I would not suggest pulling on ExDeath's banner, because there are going to be so many banners coming up in February, and even the banner that comes after this one is a pretty strong one, so there's going to be a lot more pressing banners than this one. However, ExDeath is actually really an interesting character to play with. He doesn't really play like any other member of the cast, and you can build some really interesting teams with him. Like I said, because he's so built around gravity damage, reducing them to 0 without ever really breaking them, Lightning loves him, like absolutely loves him. And so there's other interactions just like that that you can play around with. If you want something unique and cool, then ExDeath is going to be for you. If you want to prepare for his burst and his LD when they arrive in Japan, that they're looking pretty damn good. If you haven't looked it up, then I'd suggest doing so, because basically it takes what ExDeath does and multiplies it like tenfold, because you end up, his burst is kind of like made it so that the HP poison happens after every turn, so yours and your opponent's, and it all compounds together to make for a really heavy drain. But if you haven't made a team for Boss Rush yet, I talk about off-turn damage a lot recently, and there's a reason for that. Boss Rush is going to be coming very soon as well, and what that is it's all about efficiency and clearing like as much as you can within a 50-turn limit with any particular party. I like Furion for this because trap damage and keeping yourself alive at the same time, and I really like ExDeath for this as well because he has that HP poison on top of all the stuff he's doing during his own turns, and because he's slower as well, it's not going to add to your turn count too heavily because Boss Rush turn counters, it don't matter if it's a free turn or not, that counter is still going to tick down, and he's really good for that. But in all reality, if you want a banner to save on, this is a really good one to do so, because while he's really cool and I think he's really interesting, I'll only probably throw tickets at it myself because I want to save my gems for other banners that are more pressing and more important. Because while he's really cool, you never really need him. Like, you see him in some clears, but he's not somebody that gets used all the time. But if you want to use him, he is actually a very cool character. And now finally, it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to voice your opinions on any particular banner and whether you would or wouldn't pull on it and why. Now, ExDeath isn't the most popular character amongst my patrons. Thank you all once again for casting your votes and leaving your comments. We have 59% of people who say they're not going to be pulling on this banner at all. We have 38% of people saying they're going to throw some tickets at it. And just 3% of people said that they're going to use gems on this banner, which honestly, I'm not all that surprised about, purely on the back of the fact that ExDeath isn't particularly popular as a character. He's very weird, he's never needed for any content, he's just really cool. Now, for Marsha TV, who, as I said earlier, was one of the featured patrons, said, I'm going to throw a few tickets to see what happens. I'm not a fan of the character, but I'm pretty new to the game, and building a roster of characters is important, so I'll build whatever falls in my lap right now. Now, the thing I will say here is be careful. ExDeath is not a character I would recommend for new players. He's definitely somebody that's like fun and interesting, and you can work around with what he has in different ways if you already have an established sort of roster. But honestly, with the few banners that are coming up in the future, there are going to be a lot more banners that are going to be more friendly to new players. If you already have Furion, he is a fantastic character for new players, for example. I would honestly hold off if I were you. Patch says, going in with tickets on this one. I don't have any of his kit besides the free 15 CP from his event, so I'm hoping to grab at least these LD and then I can token the rest if needed. I need to save for Global First LD and other later banners. This is pretty much exactly where I'm at. So like, I think that like, if I have EX tokens, I don't plan on using them on anybody anytime soon. I've got a few, like, so I've got some weapon tokens I can spend. But so if I got the LD, I'd be really happy about it, but I'm not going to go crazy on this banner purely because there's so many banners, including some unknown variables that can change the course of things pretty damn quickly. Unless If says, unfortunately got to skip. I have no idea what he's like because I've not seen very much from him from JP players. He's also one of the last to come out without LD boards. I'll probably get his kit when his burst rolls around, but I'd rather save for the mystery global character and maybe Dark Knight Cecil. So Dark Knight Cecil is a great character to be pulling on in the near future, and a lot of people will probably pull on him, myself included. And it's true, you don't see a lot of clears with ExDeath in JP clears, because there are other characters that just get the job done more efficiently, or there are clears that use characters that are more kind of niche and like, I've seen like JP players that run Tidus in everything, and this is before he got good in JP. So there's not much reason to run ExDeath in a lot of things if you don't need to, but honestly, I think if people actually experiment with him, they'll probably be quite surprised. But if you don't want to pull for him now, you can pull for him when his burst comes around, and he does actually get really good. And then finally, Cobalt Zork said, I'm undecided honestly, I love a unique kit, and ExDeath is about as unique as they get, and yet another unit I'm annoyed I couldn't afford the first time around. I hear that. He's got some very strong effects, and the fact that he doesn't deal brave damage, just reduces enemy brave, means he bypasses a lot of annoying enemy mechanics and plays really well with the break-centric units we have. Which is exactly what I've been saying. Like, defense isn't that big a deal to him. He doesn't really pay attention to it at all. I really hope I could afford him, but Furion took 300 tickets, so I'm going to test the waters with Cecil and reevaluate whether I can afford ExDeath after that. This is sensible, I think. I think like with Dark Knight Cecil being a more pressing character, ExDeath is just what I would consider a luxury item. Like, so like, while I've sat there around giving you all the reasons as to why he is good, he's never really needed, but he is really good if you go out of your way to get him. And that's going to be it for today's video on ExDeath. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below whether you plan to pull on ExDeath, or better yet, some team compositions that you think that he'll work really well in, and share with everybody else what you would like, how you plan to use him, and where that you can, all the different places you could put him. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications on any future videos I might be making. And a big thank you once again to all of you who have been on this journey with me for all of 2020, especially to people like patrons and stuff like that who want to support the channel as much as they have. And I hope that I can continue to make you proud through the rest of the year. So thank you all very much, and I will see you next time. Take care.